Do you have to SSH into a number of different servers and you want to be able to automate that process? Now I'm going to show you how you can do that using the Kestra SSH task. Jumping into Kestra, we have an SSH plugin that will allow you to be able to connect to different servers. Now there are a bunch of different ways you can actually use this plugin. I'm going to walk you through all those different ways so that you can use it in your scenario. Now in this example here, I want to be able to run a number of commands to run a deployment script on this remote server. Now I'm going to do this using the password authentication method for SSH, which I wouldn't recommend personally. I'd probably recommend using a SSH key. But if you want to use this method, you can easily define your username and password as properties and specify the auth method as password. I'm using the key value store here to store that SSH password, and then you can just list out all of the commands you'd like to run as an array. So as you can see here, I've already got the Git repository installed. I've already got the Git repository cloned. I'm just doing a git pull to make sure I'm getting the latest changes from my branch. Then I can just make sure that my deployment script is executable, and then I can execute it. And so if I save this workflow and press execute, what we'll see now is it's going to pull that repository, which is already up to date. Big plus, and we can see it's running the script, which is very basic. It just says it needs to sleep for a bunch of time, and then it will say successful at the end. So we can see that worked as expected. This works really well if you want to combine it with a trigger such as a schedule trigger to make this run once a day, and you can have that run directly on your server as well as making sure it's pulling the latest changes. Now another option you can do is using SSH keys, which is my preferred option. Now what this does is you specify your private key. In this case I've put it in the key value store, but you could also store it as a secret, and then also specifying my username. Now the auth method here is now changed to public key, and we'll be able to execute this again and see this is going to, again, be able to connect to our server, run those commands, and we'll be able to see those logs inside of Kestra. So you get full visibility into what's going on, but you can automate it with a trigger like we have here. So I can see this was able to be successful, and it was able to check that there were any changes. Now, if you're running Kestra locally, which I am here, I'm not using anything like a Docker container. So this Kestra instance is able to access things on my machine. So I could just specify my auth method as OpenSSH, and then I can specify where my SSH configuration is. So this is especially useful if you want to set up effectively aliases to say connect to my server, where it tells it what private key it should use to connect, and also what the IP address of the host is and what username to connect. So again, you can use that as an option too, instead of having to put your private key directly into Kestra as a property. You can just tell Kestra to use your existing SSH credentials on your machine. Now let's have a look at a more event-driven example. This one's going to use a webhook URL. And so I want it so anytime any change is made to this Git repository, I want to make sure that my server has the most up-to-date changes. Potentially you have a cron job running on this server where you want it to automatically run some scripts, update scripts or something like that, but you want it to be using the most up-to-date scripts in production. So the best way you can do this is if you go to settings in Kestra and then webhooks, you'll see that I have a webhook already set up here, and you can actually get that webhook by going to triggers, and then on the right hand side here you'll get an option to copy the webhook URL. Now once you've done that, you can pop that into GitHub with your secret, which it will already have your secret on the end. So my secret is just ABCDEFG. You don't need to put a secret in the GitHub box, and then you should be good to go. Now here I've got my private key specified because I'm going to authenticate using SSH keys, and then I'm going to go to the directory of choice and then run git pull. So with this workflow set up with the webhook active as we speak, we can go to the Git repository now, and we can now modify our script. Now I'm going to just add some extra information here. I'm going to change the sleep to be 3 seconds. And then when I press commit, we'll automatically trigger that webhook because I've set it up on push events, and we'll then get it to pull the latest changes using the git pull here. So let's see that work in action. Okay, so I've made my commit. If we go to executions, we'll be able to see that it has just made a few seconds ago a new execution. We can see that it was in fact done from the trigger. And if I go to the logs, we can see that it has been able to pull the latest changes. It's made those 2 changes. So now if I was to SSH into the server directly, which I can do in a second, we'll see those latest changes. So if I SSH directly into the server, I can head over to our example repository, and I can actually go to git log and see that we have got my latest commit changes, which are the one up the top here. So we know that that's good. And if we want to just to have a look at deployment.sh, we can see that it does in fact have our latest changes. So we can be pretty happy that this is in fact working, which is good because that is obviously what we want. So this is a great way for being able to manage a bunch of different servers via SSH without having to manually do it. You can run this again by looping through different servers to run the same commands. You can set this up in an event-driven sense with a webhook trigger, or just run it nightly with a schedule. So the options are all yours. Let us know how you're using the SSH task. I'd love to hear how you're automating with SSH and how you're building really cool workflows. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps us out a load. So yeah, do make sure to subscribe and let us know what you thought of this video.